If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees, I promise.
Evan, how is it that Republicans have the cheek to blame Democrats for the tone in Washington?
First of all, Donald Trump attacking Katie Tur. Can I just say I'm with Tur? I want to talk about it. I think the tone has been very bad on both sides of the aisle, going back to the 90s and Clinton. I'm not condoning what Republicans have said. I think it's absolutely wrong and shouldn't have been said in the first place. However, Democrats themselves have also said some pretty outrageous things. You have people saying George Bush wants to kill people or wants to send Americans over to die for oil. You have Kanye saying George Bush doesn't care about African Americans. You have former Representative Joe Garcia in the House of Representatives saying that the GOP is the Taliban. Republicans are not the Taliban. We don't want to kill the poor. We don't want to kill minorities, as Salon and Slate have alleged. We actually do care about helping people, but we differ on policy. And I think it is a symptom of the overall problem. I think both sides of the aisle need to step back. Again, I do not defend Republicans who said that. I think what Chris Collins said is absolutely wrong. The only person who's responsible for Wednesday's shooting is the shooter.
Well, you've used my least favorite term in Christendom, both sides, because I both sidesism and whataboutism is ridiculous. I mean, for one thing, the criticisms of George W. Bush were because we were involved in a war for which the pretext was a completely false, made-up pretext, right? It was saying that Iraq was involved in 9/11. And so I think the anger and the criticism was because, wait a minute, people were being sent to die in a war based on something that wasn't true and based on ginning up Americans' emotions around 9/11. Are you saying that's the equivalent of, for instance, Ted Nugent about Barack Obama saying he should suck on my machine gun? Is that there is no both sidesism here.
No, it's
You're talking about criticism of a war versus a president sending us to war.
Criticism of the war does not allow you, does not justify going out and saying that George Bush is mentally retarded or having cartoonists from the Pittsburgh.
Said he was
there were plenty of protesters on the left who said he was mentally retarded, and then you have plenty of cartoonists in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette who painted him as a monkey who cared about nobody else and didn't know what he was doing. You have people going out and saying that Republicans are evil. Their agenda is insensitive, and they want to...
You don't think it's insensitive to cut Meals on Wheels? You're saying that it is actually the same, that there is an equivalency between hanging Barack Obama in effigy, calling him a witch doctor, calling him Hitler, and saying, hey, you can't cut Meals on Wheels. It's insensitive. It is insensitive to cut Meals on Wheels.
That Republicans are evil and that they are the Taliban and they have a war on women. Have you noticed how we can't even get a bill passed? How can we have a war on women when we can't even...
But what are the bills that you're attempting to pass? Is it not cutting Meals on Wheels, cutting Sesame Street, going after Medicaid, which helps the poor? I do not see the equivalency. I'm going to be honest.
And you know I have opposed those, but...
Okay, well, I'm going to let other people into this conversation. Eric, do you think that there is a sort of equal and opposite? We now have Fox News walking back from the idea, the fair and balanced slogan, because they said it was the subject of ridicule. Is there an equivalency here? Is it both sides are equally mean?
No, I think you did a pretty good rundown. You know, we have Fox News. What did they say this week doing? They spent the week laying the premise that Trump should fire the special prosecutor, right? And the acting FBI director was the, quote, ringleader of this campaign to oust Trump. So nobody on Fox is trying to step back from the tone. No one from Fox is saying, hey, let's be responsible and things like that. And, you know, then you've got people running onto the stage at Shakespeare in the Park because they don't disagree. And if these Republicans are so upset about tone, where were they when a reporter was body slammed in the primary?
We were putting out statements saying it was wrong.
I didn't see it.
What planet are you on?
That reporter was ridiculed daily by the right-wing media, by a sissy.
By the alt-right, but you have Republican representatives saying it was wrong.
Paul Ryan barely got up enough courage to say, well, maybe he should apologize.
He did it, but he didn't do it enough to your satisfaction?
Absolutely.
That's outrageously ridiculous.
He made a determination based on that consultation and based on a deliberative process to terminate the FBI director, as they recommended.
But, Mr. Sekulow, that is not what the president said to Lester Holt. The president said to Lester Holt that he had already made the decision to fire James Comey. So I'm confused here.
Let's assume, for the sake of argument,
There was all kinds of decisions being discussed.
Right.
But this crystallized that decision.
So is this where we're going, Evan? They're going to essentially try to throw Mr. Rosenstein under the bus and make him the fall guy.
Well, they'll try and do anything to protect President Trump. They have no loyalty to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein. I mean, that argument was saying, well, the facts aren't the facts. Our opinion is these facts are much better than the real facts.
But it also isn't what they're trying to argue, that you can't believe what Donald Trump says, even if he says it on television?
Well, they're actually trying to argue, and I think it's part of what Trump has been tweeting for the past 10 or so days, especially with the witch hunt. He's trying to protect his image with the base. Because if that base cracks, that's when Republicans will start abandoning him. So when you go out and he says it's a witch hunt, everybody is against me, I'm under investigation for doing the thing that the Deputy Attorney General told me to do.
Yeah.
First of all, I never knew that the Deputy Attorney General had power over any president at any point.
Right.
Thank you, Donald Trump, for enlightening us. But it's all about shoring up the base and calcifying it, because if the base cracks, then Republicans abandon him and will publicly oppose him. And that's the big question Democrats have been asking. When will they leave? When the base leaves.
No, I think you make a good point, because he also Trump also tweeted about his 50% with Rasmussen, which is a Republican-leaning poll, which means that what he really is focused on is, does his base still love him? And that's what he cares about. Yeah, and that's a good problem. And for our two Republican strategists here, I'm going to start with you on this, Evan, because it is true. I mean, the Republican Party is narrow casting and it's a lot eeasier. The party is a lot less diverse, meaning that you only really have to market to kind of a one-off group, right? It's mostly white. It's 90+% white, and so it's and it's mostly very conservative, and so you can essentially move the whole barge. If you want the party not to care so much about Russiagate, you can actually pick up the whole Republican Party and move it more pro-Russia. Whereas in the Democratic Party, you've got some very anti-Russia people and some very pro. We've got a much more diversity. So this is easier for Donald Trump. He can just tell the whole party, Russia's our friend, Russiagate's a lie, healthcare thing good, and it moves the whole party at once.
Well, two things. First of all, you and I have talked about this off air. There was the 2004 Daily Show segment where they took a whole bunch of people from the Democratic National Convention, and they were representative of each group. And then Stephen Colbert asked, what's the most important issue to you? Everybody answer at once. And they had 20 people giving 20 different answers. That's very hard for any political party.
Absolutely.
But I think in terms of Donald Trump saying, okay, we can move Russia and Russiagate, that's false. If you saw this week, the most underreported story was that Senate Republicans joined up and almost unanimously voted to prevent the President of the United States from lifting sanctions on Russia without the Congress's permission. And now that bill has gone to the House, and the White House is frantically calling Republican House members, because they know that bill is going to pass, but they need to get to 1/3 +1 to help that, so there can be no veto override.